The summons arrived on thick paper, heavy enough to feel like a stone in his palm. The seal, crimson, waxed, old as the portraits that stared down every corridor, was still warm when William cracked it. He read the first line once, twice, then a third time, as if repetition might turn the words into something else. By order of His Majesty, immediate attendance required. Matters of succession and preparatory arrangements. Clarendon Room, 10 o'clock. Something cold slid under his ribs. He glanced at the clock over the mantel. 9:20, the letter didn't request. It judged. The house still smelled like morning. Toast and cut fruit and the ghost of Kate's perfume trailing the staircase. Down the hall a burst of laughter, Charlotte bargaining for just one more pancake. Louis singing nonsense words about dinosaurs. George quiet and observant, that watchfulness he wore like an heirloom. The small kingdom they had built out of ordinary minutes felt newly fragile, like spun glass. He folded the letter, slid it into his pocket, and took one more second in the doorway. The kitchen was a painting of warmth. Kate in an oversized cardigan, coffee mug in one hand, spatula in the other. Sunlight lay across the flagstones like a blanket. He could have stood there forever. He could have let time congeal and set. Who was at the door? Kate asked without looking up, flipping a pancake with the ease of muscle memory. Palace, he said. He meant for his voice to be casual. It wasn't. She heard the break in the word. Her eyes lifted. One look and her smile thinned. When? Now. Everything gentle in her face drew taut for an instant. Then it smoothed. She nodded once, the soldier beneath the silk. Eat first, she said. Or at least pretend. He moved to the table. Louis pushed a plate toward him with sticky hands. So I saved you the biggest one, Louis announced, syrup shining on his grin. Heroic work, William said, and kissed the top of his son's head. He tried to swallow. The pancake was a stone, the coffee ash. George's gaze flicked to his pocket, noted the shape of the letter, and came back to William's face. For a child who wanted so badly just to be 9, he missed nothing. What do they want? George asked quietly. Not the words of a child so much as the tenor of one. Discussions. William forced air into his lungs. Plans, nothing to worry about. George's spoon scraped once around his bowl. But you are worried. He almost smiled at that. So like himself at that age, pulling the truth out of the spaces adults left blank. I'm thinking, William said, which was true enough to say out loud. The second hand clattered forward. Kate put a plate in front of George, squeezed his shoulder, reached for the letter without asking. He let her. She read quickly, eyes darting left to right, then back again. He watched the moment the subtext arrived for her, too, the way her body went still, while only her throat moved as she swallowed. This is staged, she murmured. Orchestrated. The Clarendon Room for a 10 o'clock? That's not a conversation. That's theatre. Then we'll be very good in the audience, he said, because he still wanted to protect the morning from what was coming. He was half hoping for argument. Instead, she stepped into his space, slid a hand along the back of his neck, and pressed her forehead against his. For one heartbeat there was no palace, no protocol, no clock. He felt the steadiness of her. He thought, this is the country I'm sworn to defend. Finish, she said. Then go. He didn't finish. He stood, kissed each child, and told a sentence of truth that sounded like a promise. I'll be back for dinner. Even if it's late, Charlotte challenged, eyes narrow, fierce already in ways that would both terrify and save him one day. Even if it's late, he said. She accepted the oath like a sovereign. The drive blurred, hedgerows slicked with rain, the A-roads peeling toward a sky the color of pewter. What he remembered, the sound of tires humming against wet, the rhythmic thud of wipers marking seconds like a metronome, the pale line of his knuckles on the wheel. He left the radio off. He preferred the company of dread when it was quiet. London rose grey on grey, a city that had never been gentle and did not intend to start today. When the gates groaned open and the Range Rover rolled under the black iron teeth, the old ache returned, a pressure behind the sternum he had first felt at 12 and learned never truly left you. The palace swallowed him, marble gilt echo. Portraits peered down through varnish, measuring him against centuries of faces that had found the crown a weight and a weapon. They sent him not to the Clarendon Room, but past it, 2 rooms farther. A change of stage at the last minute. He recognized the move. It was the kind you made when you wanted your opponent off balance, before he stepped into the light. He entered. The room was dressed like a verdict. A long table, lunette windows bare, grey morning pooled across polished wood. Chairs ranked like soldiers. At the head, her Camilla stood to greet him. The pearls glowed. The smile did not. To her right, a cluster of senior staff. To her left, private secretaries with clipboards. No empty chair at the head for his father. That absence had weight. He could feel the push of it between his shoulders. "Your Royal Highness," she said, voice smooth as lacquer. "Thank you for coming at such short notice." "Please sit." "I'll stand," William said, polite the way knives are polished. A ripple ran down the table. Pens stilled. Camilla's smile set half a degree harder. "As you prefer." The first folder opened with a satisfying click. She slid paper forward as if laying down winning cards. "Given His Majesty's treatments and the uncertainties of the coming months, we have developed a comprehensive approach to the education and preparedness of the heir in waiting. Accelerated tutoring, a curated mentorship within the household, and an immediate transition into a bespoke program designed to shape and safeguard the future." Sovereign, the future sovereign, was 9 and liked to sleep with the window cracked so he could hear the wind. William didn't look at the papers. He watched her eyes. "People told you the truth there when they were busy with their hands." "Under whose supervision?" he asked. "Ours," she said without pause. "Primarily mine." "Why?" He let the word drop and sit. "Stability," she said, and the senior clerk to her right murmured the word as if it blessed the room. "Consistency of tone and expectation, a unified approach to the transition." "And the boy?" William asked softly. "At what point does he become part of this approach?" She did not flinch, and he had to give her that. "The boy is the approach. He is the Crown's continuity." "My son," William corrected. There was no heat on it yet, just the straightening you do when someone says your family name wrong at the door of your own house. "The boy," she repeated, an answer to a different question. "Belongs to history as much as to you." Wires thrummed in his fingertips. He placed both hands flat on the table to keep them still. "He belongs to himself," he said. "For the rest is training." A second folder clicked open, second card, second blade. "On the matter of continuity," she continued, "a Regency Council is to be established to ensure the Crown's duties proceed unimpeded. A co-regency in effect, should His Majesty be unable to carry out certain obligations. We must avoid vacuums. Vacuums invite chaos. And your position on this council?" He already knew. He wanted to hear her say it. "Co-regent," she said, "alongside you." It landed exactly the way it had been designed to, heavy and inevitable, like a safe being lowered on a winch. She expected him to move back an inch to get out from under its shadow. He did not. The only movement came from inside, the thin ice of patience cracking. "No," he said, and for the first time the word made a sound in the room. Heads came up the way birds do when a fox touches the grass. "I beg your pardon?" she said, which meant she didn't. No to the program as described. No to removing George from school. No to a co-regency. He kept the cadence even, measured like a march. A private secretary, nervous, hopeful to be invisible, pushed a page forward to Camilla. She didn't look at it. Her eyes were on William's face. "You're tired?" she said, and managed the sound of concern like someone dropping a coin into a jar of nails. Too close to see the frame. "This is about ensuring the Crown does not falter." "The Crown doesn't falter," he said, and surprised himself by how steady it came. People do, especially when they build scaffolding on sand. He could feel the room tilt. He had unbalanced the scene. She couldn't let that stand. "Gentlemen," she said to the door, "please escort His Royal Highness to the anteroom. We will continue when he is prepared to proceed in an appropriate manner." They had uniforms, gloves, and the same careful expression soldiers wear when they are about to carry a piano down a staircase. No malice, just orders. Everyone knew how this was supposed to go. He would object. They would murmur. A compromise would be offered, and then a statement would be drafted in soft velvet language that meant precisely what she had decided at breakfast. That was the choreography. That was the palace dance. He stepped instead. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't clench his fists. He simply removed the chair between himself and the head of the table with a practiced half-turn and took one long stride into the clear space where all the air suddenly seemed to live. The guards paused, not from fear but from surprise. People like him did not step into the space. People like him sat where they were put and then argued with their posture. "If you believe," he said quietly, and the quiet made everyone lean in, "that you can decide my son's future without me, you are about to find yourself in a country you do not know." He could feel the line when he crossed it. It wasn't a rule written anywhere. It was older than rules, older than the building, older even than the portraits. It was the line where you stop being polite with thieves. "Stand down," Camilla said to the guards without looking at them, which was the kind of mistake made by people who had never needed to count blades. The older one's eyes flicked. "Door, Camilla, William." He was measuring authority against orders, trying to add numbers that did not share a unit. William offered him what he needed, the simple language of service. "You serve the crown," William said, and he gave them the dignity of meeting their eyes, each in turn. "And the crown is not threatened by a father protecting his child." The older guard's jaw worked, then set. He did not move forward. The younger one, blonde, too careful by half, shifted back one step, the body's own arithmetic showing him the answer he could not say out loud. William turned back to the table and found Camilla's gaze. The mask had slipped a fraction. There was anger now and something like calculation. She had expected a negotiation. She had gotten a refusal. "You will regret this," she said, and meant to make the words the kind that stick and sting. "I have regretted more polite things," he said. Hans survived them. He didn't slam the door. He didn't let the moment climb onto its own frame and become drama. He walked out as if he were leaving any meeting, with the simple authority of a man who had realized he did not have to explain his right to the ground he was standing on. He wanted air. He found the corridor, carpet soft enough to swallow sound, portraits lined like jurors, and kept walking until the world had fewer eyes. He stopped in a bay where rain braided itself down the glass and put his hands briefly, uselessly against the cool of it. He called. He didn't go through a secretary. He didn't ask if it was a good time. "Father," he said when the connection opened, and heard the rustle of sheets, the soft beep that marked machines, the lift and fall of a breath he wished were steadier. "I've heard," Charles said. His voice was thinner than the last time and somehow more himself. "And I imagine you have too. I need you to tell me what you signed," William said, and it came out sharper than he had intended, worry finding its quickest language. A pause. In the space, William could picture the room. Flowers too formal for comfort. A book open and unread. The chiffon of curtains stirring in a draught. His father's hand ring bright against skin gone unfamiliar. "I signed intent," Charles said at last. "I did not sign my grandson away." "Did you give her authority?" William asked. "Over George." "Over me." The pause was worse this time because he could hear what it held. Fatigue, worry, a bone-deep wish to be stronger than a body that had decided to make its own terms. When Charles spoke, there was an apology inside the words like a thorn under skin. "I let her carry things I should have carried myself." He closed his eyes against the flare of anger, not at his father, but at the way illness unlocked doors for opportunists. He opened them again because anger was not useful now. "Then take them back," he said. "Today, I will," Charles said. "Come here." "I will," William said, and hung up because he could not stand the sound of machines telling him truths he already knew. He didn't go home first. He went to Clarence's house, to the room that still smelled slightly of cigar and polish and older sadnesses. He found his father propped against pillows, smaller but paradoxically clearer, as if the illness had scraped at him and left the core gleaming. They didn't use titles in that room. They used names they hadn't used enough. Father, son. The conversation was not a performance. It was two men stripping theatre off words, until only the truth remained. Yes, she had overreached. Yes, he had been too tired to see the shape of it. Yes, it stopped now. No, there would be no council with two heads. No, there would be no program that put a boy in a harness and called it duty. "I should have protected him before you had to," Charles said. And the sorrow in it was the kind that doesn't look for absolution. "Protect me now," William said, "so I can protect him later." "I will," his father said. "And when it's time, you won't share the crown. You'll carry it." When he left, the rain had thinned to a mist. London had put its evening face on, lamps conspiratorial, wet streets turning the city into a duplicate of itself. He drove toward the thing he needed most, the only remedy he trusted anymore for the poison of days like this. He drove home. Kate met him at the door like she had every other day that mattered, with that particular stillness that was her armor and her mercy. He didn't have to speak. She could read the answer in the angle of his shoulders. Still, he said it. It's handled. She reached for his hand and drew him into the warm. In the living room, the small chaos of homework and crayons and book spines made their own argument for what mattered. George stood when he saw his father and did not ask the question. He waited for the answer. Charlotte held a pencil, an astronaut mid-leap suspended on her page. Louis barreled in from the hall and collided with William's knees in a tackle that would have gotten him sent to the bench in any other league. "Are we moving?" George asked, and the words were so plain they broke him a little. "No one is moving," William said. "Not until you're old enough to choose your own trousers." Charlotte tilted her head. "So, it was a no?" "It was a series of no's," Kate said dryly from behind him. And he loved her for finding room for humor even here. He told them pieces, enough to be honest without asking them to carry what was not theirs. He said there were people who thought they knew better than families. He said sometimes those people sat at very long tables. He said they had wanted to make decisions for George. He said he had reminded them that families decide together. He did not say the words ordered guards. He did not say co-regent. He did not say how close the ground had felt for a minute, as if the building were breathing against his spine. Charlotte listened with her fierce head tilt, then looked grave and ate, in a way that sent a warning line through his heart. "I don't like it when people think children are ideas." "Neither do I," he said. That night, after teeth and stories and 3 separate summonses for water, the house went quiet the way a tide goes out, slowly leaving shells in the hollows. He checked each room the way he always did. Louis starfished, 1 foot escaped the duvet. Charlotte burrowed, curls everywhere. George on his side, hands tucked under his cheek like he had been caught in prayer. A 9-year-old boy dreaming of nothing more consequential than a math test and whether a friend would share his crisps tomorrow. In their room, the door shut and the world finally outside, Kate sat on the edge of the bed and let go. Not loud, the silent kind that starts at the ribs and shakes everything you were trying to hold steady. He moved immediately, no words, just arms. He remembered being young and thinking protection meant standing in front of things. He understood now it often meant holding someone while they dissolved, and then putting the pieces back exactly where they'd been. "I thought they might take you," she said into his shoulder, and he had no defense against the sound of that. "They didn't," he said. "They won't." "Not because they couldn't," she said, pulling back to look him straight in the face, "but because you decided they wouldn't." He sat with that. It was a different verb than he had been raised on. Decide instead of obey, protect instead of comply. It felt like trying on a uniform that fit properly for the first time. "I realize something," he said slowly, tasting the shape of it as he spoke. "I've been waiting for permission to protect what is mine to protect. And today," she said, "you remembered you never needed it." Days found a new cadence. The palace released a statement shaped to mean the right thing, that His Majesty remained the steward of succession, and that all decisions regarding the education of their Royal Highnesses rested with their parents. It was the sort of sentence that made no one bleed publicly while quietly rearranging furniture in the House of Power. Reporters tried to read thunder in the weather of William's schedule. Courtiers practiced saying nothing in 4 different ways. The machinery that had tried to move the boy shifted gears with a grind and a sulk. At home, the small republic thrived. George walked a little taller, under a weight that somehow seemed lighter. He began to ask new questions, the kind that suggested he understood fear differently now, but also understood what you could do with it. Charlotte drew a picture of the family and put a crown not on any head but on a shelf in the background, as if it were a hat you might take down when the weather required. Louis staged a battle between a plastic triceratops and the idea of bedtime, and declared a truce that involved biscuits. There were still calls. There were still schedules redrawn and engagements trimmed to leave room for the things that now mattered, with a new loudness. William learned a new way to say no that sounded like, "Not this week," and "We'll revisit in the spring, and that's a wonderful initiative for my aunt." He learned how to put "not yet" in places, where other people had written now in ink. Then came the day the phone rang, and it was his father, not sounding like a man pinned beneath an illness, but like a man pushing it off. The numbers were better. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, in the particular tone doctors reserve for telling hope to behave. William felt something unclench so suddenly it made him dizzy. He told his father he loved him. He heard it back. The line clicked softly as if the building itself exhaled. They were a few days into this new weather when the bell rang at dusk, twice, impatient. The sky at Anma was smeared with color, a bruised peach turning to a blue that promised frost. Surprises at that hour were rarely good. He crossed the hall, the old boards under the rug creaking the way a house does when it knows your footsteps. The children beat him to the door and then froze, forming a small wall of height in descending order. He came to stand between them, Kate at his shoulder, and opened the door. A woman stood on the step, hat in her hands, rain making commas of her hair. She had the pallor of someone who had not slept, and the backbone of someone who had decided to do a hard thing. For a second he didn't place her. Then the palace's endless Rolodex of names and faces shuffled and clicked into alignment. He had seen her in corridors, always a few steps behind. A private secretary, but not anyone's favorite. Competent, unremarkable, invisible, which made her suddenly remarkable now. "I shouldn't be here," she began, and the tremor in her voice made him want to invite her in immediately, and also close the door, and pretend none of this existed. "I'll be dismissed if they find out." But I couldn't, after what I saw, after what I signed. He stepped aside. "Come in." She sat at the kitchen table, which had a dent in it from the time Louis tried to see if a spoon could become a hammer. The normality of the room softened her fear. Kate poured tea without asking if she wanted it, which is how you tell people you've decided to be kind. The children hovered like satellites, until William sent them gently to the next room, where a film could do the work of keeping them out of history for one more hour. The woman laid an envelope on the table. Not palace paper. Not official. Ordinary white that looked treasonous in this house. "There are drafts," she said, forcing the words out like nails. "Versions of the program, the council, the transitions. There are notes in the margins that don't match the file copies, because those were the notes we weren't meant to keep. I kept them. I thought someone needed to know what was being built. In case it started again. In case she didn't finish. He didn't need her to. Why now?" he asked. "Because I saw you stand up," she said, and the answer was so human it felt like a blessing. "And I understood that sometimes one person standing makes another person brave enough to walk." He did not open the envelope immediately. He had learned finally that some acts deserved stillness around them. He thanked her. Kate thanked her. They did not ask for more than she could give. They let her go back into the night with her job possibly in peril and her spine straighter than the road. When the house was quiet again, when the credits of the film had rolled, and the children had been kissed and herded and tucked, he opened the envelope with a care that felt ceremonial. He and Kate read shoulder to shoulder. Margins spoke. Doodles massed plans. Names appeared that didn't surprise them, and one that did. A council of influence, not just of title. Pressure points they had expected, and a new one they had not. A charitable trust that was less charity than lever. They didn't panic. They didn't rage. They rearranged tomorrow. He made 2 calls to 2 people who had taught him the use of silence, and one more to a barrister whose talent was making words into moats. He drafted a letter, and when he had the bones of it, he handed it to Kate, who added 2 sentences that turned it into something a court would read and understand. He wrote to his father, succinct, factual, respectful, unyielding. He did not write to Camilla. Some doors once closed are not reopened by note. The next day belonged to daylight. He went where he was scheduled to go and shook the hands he was scheduled to shake. He looked like a prince in good light. Crisp suit, clean lines, jaw set to statesman. He knew how to do that part better than anyone knew he knew. The journalists shouted. He smiled and let the sound go over him like rain off wax. The real work happened elsewhere, in rooms of wood and law where words had sharp edges, and in a hospital room where a tired man read a letter twice and then rang a bell that meant somebody else would do the ringing now. There is a way things change in old institutions. It isn't with explosions. It's with weight shifting, 1 degree then 2, until a marble that looks steady goes rolling and everyone agrees it has always rolled exactly that way. The statement the palace released 2 days later was a marble already halfway down the slope. His Majesty has reviewed and rescinded all extraordinary proposals regarding the education and preparation of His Royal Highness Prince George. All matters pertaining to his upbringing rest solely with their Royal Highnesses the Prince and Princess of Wales. No Regency Council is contemplated. Her Majesty the Queen Consort retains her existing ceremonial and charitable roles. The rest of it was padding, dates and duties, and words that said nothing so very loudly you could almost hear the echo. He went home that evening to the sound of Charlotte practicing a piano piece. She had declared impossible yesterday and nearly had today. Louis was colouring on the floor, entirely outside the lines on purpose, announcing himself as a revolutionary. George was sitting in the window seat with a book open, but his eyes on the trees, thinking thoughts he wouldn't have for a few years, yet the words to hand to. Kate had flour on her cheek. He wiped it with his thumb and kissed the flour and then her skin. He told himself that if all that ever came of today was this, that the kitchen still looked like this, that the light still lay exactly so, then he had done enough. Later, when the house slept and the kettle ticked gently as it cooled, they sat on the back steps and let night wrap itself around their shoulders. The stars were diamonds hammered thin. The field smelled of damp and life. Somewhere a fox laughed at something only foxes find funny. "What happens now?" Kate asked, because she was always the one brave enough to ask now what. "Now," he said, "we practice. We train, not him, us. We learn when to let them have the picture and when to keep the frame. We teach the children the difference between attention and care. We build a bigger table in here so they never want the one out there." "And her?" Kate said, and it was a question about one person and also a question about an idea that would outlive both of them. "She waits," he said, "and watches, and tries again in a new shape. We'll be ready." He thought of the envelope. He thought of the guard's eyes. He thought of his father, thinner and somehow taller in his resolve. He thought of the line in the room, and how once you cross it you do not go back, but you do go forward differently. He had believed for years that duty was a thing that required him to be less himself. He saw now that the opposite might be true, that the country, the family, the crown, needed the version of him that would step into a space instead of yielding it. The version who would look at a guard and ask him to remember who he served, and then look at his son and promise him his childhood with the same tone of command. The bell rang again 3 nights later, and he rose without a word. Visitors at dusk had become a sign, a ritual he had not asked for and had nevertheless accepted. He opened the door and found no secretary, no supplicant, no messenger from another careful room. A boy stood there, 14 maybe, stringy hair, a jacket too thin for the cold, cheeks wind-chapped. His hands shook, not from fear, William saw, but from adrenaline and hunger. "Can I help you?" William asked. The voice he uses for school, tours and charity kitchens and small disasters. The boy looked past him into the light, and then back at his face and wrestled with the etiquette of centuries and the urgency of whatever had brought him to this step. In the end, urgency won. He thrust a phone forward as if holding out an offering. "Sir," the boy said, and could not bring himself to add the rest because he hadn't been raised to speak that language. "They sent me. Or no one sent me, I saw it. So I work in the shop. Behind the shop, deliveries, I wasn't supposed—" He swallowed. "There are letters. About your boy. About all of you. I took pictures. I didn't know where to. They said if I ever needed help, come to you." William's body went still and easy in the same breath, the way a river looks calm while moving very fast. He took the phone. He saw names and signatures, and one symbol he knew too well, the elegant crest hiding the teeth beneath. He felt Kate behind him like a hand on his spine. "What's your name?" William asked. "Arun," the boy said, and his chin tilted up almost defiantly, as if daring the house to judge the name. "Come in, Arun," William said. "You look like you could use supper." The boy blinked as if he had been expecting sirens or scolding. Instead, he got soup, and the strange mercy of a family where people listened to him, as if he mattered because he did. Later, when the boy slept on their sofa under a blanket, Louis declared magic. William sat at the kitchen table with Kate and thought about the strange shape of service, how it sometimes knocked on your door in an ill-fitting jacket with proof of a danger you already suspected. He thought about the net of people who had woven itself around them, not because of titles, but because of the story courage tells. Stand, and others stand. Speak, and others risk whispering. Protect, and others dare to deliver. In the morning the sun found them as it always did, indifferent to politics and grateful for windows. There would be meetings. There would be statements. There would be a boy who needed a solicitor and a new coat, and parents somewhere who would either be relieved or furious, and both for good reason. There would be another small battle with the old hunger of the palace to eat what it could reach. He poured coffee and smiled at Kate over the rim of the mug. It was not a grin. It was the quiet look of two people who had tested their country and found it still here. The children came thundering in, a cavalry of mismatched socks and urgent news about cereal. And the day began in a rush, as all good days should. On his phone, his father's message waited, simply proud of you. Proud of all of you. It is not the crown that makes a king. It is a kitchen, and the people he refuses to hand over. He typed back one word, together, and put the phone face down on the table so that he could see his family rather than the world wanting something from them. Outside, low clouds dragged the light, but the rooms were bright anyway. A boy in the sitting room snored softly. A girl at the piano made a mistake and laughed. A smaller boy spilled milk and looked immediately at his father to gauge the weather. It was fair. Later, inevitably, he would walk again under the iron teeth, and there would be rooms where nothing grew and people tried to plant their agendas like hedges. But he knew his map now. The line in the room was marked in ink. He knew how to say no without shouting, and yes without surrender. He knew where power actually lived, in small hands, in quiet vows, in a door opened at dusk to someone who didn't know the right word for help, but had found it anyway. He gathered his family for a minute before the day stole them in 3 directions. Arms around shoulders, a tangle they had perfected. "Remember," he said, because he needed to hear it as much as they did, "we choose us first. The rest can queue." They nodded in that solemn way children have when they are agreeing to something bigger than they can yet carry. Kate tucked herself under his arm and, as if they had rehearsed it, they all breathed at the same time. A house-sized lung that filled and emptied and filled again. This was what he had stepped forward to keep. This was what he would answer the door to protect, again and again, until the day the crown came to live on the shelf Charlotte had drawn for it. And then, when needed, on his head, he picked up his keys, kissed his wife, let Louis wipe an unnecessary handprint on his jacket because ritual matters. He stepped into the day, not as a man fleeing a summons, but as one answering his own. And far away, in a room arranged like a verdict, someone who had mistaken proximity for power realized, a fraction too late, that she had taught him exactly the lesson she had hoped he would never learn. He would not be moved. He would move. And when the next letter came stamped and heavy, when the next bell rang with someone else's urgency, he would open the door and measure what wanted in against what lived here. And he would answer in the voice he had found the day he stepped forward, the voice that stopped guards mid-step and told children the truth and made a city full of marble stand a little more on his side. If you are deciding for my son without me, you are mistaken. If you are deciding for my family without us, you are mistaken. If you are deciding for a crown that thinks children are ideas, you are mistaken. You are in our country now.